All right, everyone, welcome in to the first Two Countries, Two Americas all sports episode of 2022. We certainly hope everyone had a happy new year and a great Christmas and just, you a great holiday season in general, as we are all looking forward to kick off a brand new year here in this decade that so far, let's be honest, hasn't been the best. Obviously, we know with everything's been going on in the 2020s, but hopefully 2022 is the year that begins to shift around a little bit. So from me to you, a happy new year. I'm Nicholas Siller here live in Chattanooga, Tennessee of the United States of America. And joining me from somewhere in Germany, I'm not even sure where in Germany, um, is Gus Tomazeli. Normally he's in Brazil, but he is over on the European continent tonight. Gus, how's your trip to Germany been? And happy new year, my friend.
First of all, Feliz Ano Novo, as we say in Brazil. Happy New Year. I'm in Düsseldorf, northern Germany, kind of enjoying some time off here in Europe, enjoying some German beer, having some tour in some stadiums. Unfortunately, I won't be able to watch some German soccer because still some Corona kind of some corona restrictions, but enjoying some European time, but ready talk sports in 2022 because especially in America, it was a really big weekend in football.
Oh yeah, for sure. I'm talking a lot of football things here. Some good division back-to-back division champions here, Tennessee Titans. Sorry, Colts fans, but perhaps some things I'm not as happy about, and we'll get to that as well. I went to some football games myself here in the United States. That and I'll definitely talk about my experiences at those really big football games that I went to. Obviously, the presenting topics, we got a lot of soccer topics as per usual, and we'll definitely get into all of that throughout the course of the show. But since this is the first year of 2022, I thought we would kind of just step back and look at the upcoming sports calendar and just think about what's going to happen because there's a lot of things that are going to happen this year throughout the course of sports. Obviously, with the pandemic still going on, um, there's questions whether certain stuff is going to happen, if certain stuff is going to get canceled, and there's obviously other factors. But I've put up a sporting calendar here from topin.com sports, and it just obviously you got your stuff that happens every single year, and you have your stuff that happens every 4 years. So I kind of just want to focus on the stuff that really is kind of abnormal, right? Because this year, probably the first major event is going to be the Winter Olympics in Beijing, China, and these have been pretty controversial. From just a diplomatic standpoint, from obviously the pandemic concerns. These are scheduled to start in a month from tomorrow, and I really don't know how these are going to go because I'll tell you this, I don't feel very excited for these because there's a lot of questions about the government of China and the stuff they're doing, and uh, just whether or not we really should be giving them this platform right now um, for these 2022 Winter Olympics, and you know I think it's going to be interesting to see how the world reacts to how they present themselves. 'Cause I think China's gotten a lot of criticism over the past 2 to 3 years, especially for various reasons. You got Hong Kong, you've got Tibet, you've got the Uyghurs. Obviously, the coronavirus started in China. What responsibility did the Chinese government have, if they had any at all? Um, there's just a lot. So I'd be very interested to see what Xi Jinping and the Chinese Communist Party kind of to me, how do they use the Winter Olympics to kind of change some of these international narratives about China to me? What are your thoughts on the upcoming Winter Olympics?
I think it's of course the Brazilian side Winter Olympic is not. I don't pay much attention to it. I mean, since in Brazil we don't have any winter sports, but I think it's going to be very challenging as the second world sports event since the pandemic happened. Of course, Tokyo Olympics was the first, and I think the second consecutive, you know, big sporting event in Asia. I mean, and also the World Cup is going to be in Asia. I mean, the Middle East with Qatar, and so I think it's going to be a very mixed year between. I think this 2022 is going to be the year where politics and sports going to mix the both, from Winter Olympics to World Cup. Because Qatar also has some criticism with violations of human rights, especially with the workers in the World Cup, and of course the whole LGBT question. But the Winter Olympics is going to be uh, China will definitely wanted to put a show as they did in 2008. Kind of use this as a propaganda, kind of show the strength of China. But definitely it's going to be a very, I think the attention is going to be more off the eyes of the outside of the sports than in the sports itself.
Right. Right. Because obviously, who wins gold, who doesn't win gold, that's always interesting. I don't know much about winter sports myself. I'm from the U.S. I'm from Tennessee, right? We don't get much snow here. Well, we did get actually snow across Tennessee yesterday, except for where I'm at in Chattanooga. We didn't get anything, but some of the surrounding areas did get snow. So, you know, but outside of that, um, just Winter Olympics are not as big of a deal as the Summer Olympics for most, just because you don't. It's easier to do track and field than to get into skiing, just because for a lot of people they don't have the access to a mountain or a ski resort that they have to a local track field or a local soccer field. And of course, obviously, I think one of the big bummers for me, because the only sport I really get into is hockey during the Winter Olympics, but even the NHL players are not going to be going. So to me, the quality of hockey is going to go significantly down during these Olympics, and especially for the U.S. and Canadian teams. Because that's normally a really fun game to watch when the U.S. plays Canada or the U.S. plays Russia in the Winter Olympics. But this year, I just don't think it'll be the same.
Yeah, I mean, but not surprised. Hockey in the Winter Olympics is kind of like baseball in the Summer Olympics. The biggest athletes are not gonna play because the biggest league also is in the middle of their season. So and also NBA in the last Summer Olympics had to deal with that because normally up until 2016 Summer Olympics, NBA was didn't have to deal with that conflict because the Olympics were in the NBA off season, but now even the NBA has to deal with that. So I mean, it's of course the NHL is not gonna give their athletes and because who the commissioner answers to? The owners, and the owners definitely want to protect their assets, the players, not wanting to leave in the middle of the season.
Oh, absolutely. And that's what's made the hockey, at least for the Winter Olympics in the past, much more interesting, just because there is parity. The U.S. just doesn't dominate like in basketball, because basketball to me is just uninteresting. Because for the most part, the U.S. basketball team, they can roll out their B or C team and still win the gold. So, because one of the craziest sport events I can remember is the 2010 Gold Cup match between the U.S. and Canada, and just how passionate the Canadian fans were because they really wanted to beat the U.S. on their home soil, and especially considering that was the one and only time they're probably going to get that shot. I think that was just a really interesting um, event, and be very interested to see just how it's done. And of course, it's kind of weird because we had the Summer Olympics just 6 months ago, and a really weird situation in Tokyo, and it's it's kind of interesting too because it's the second straight Winter Olympics held in a pretty controversial country. Because the last Winter Olympics were in Sochi, Russia, and those were really controversial. And because I believe the next one is in France, if I'm not mistaken. On like a Twitter, because I know the
The
summer.
Summer Olympic is going to be in Paris. I even gonna say after the World Cup in 2022, the Olympics and the World Cup kind of go back into the more developed countries. Then Paris hosts the 2024 Summer Olympics. Then U.S., Canada, and Mexico host the World Cup. So it kind of shifts from the east side of the world to the west side of the world.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting balance too, because you have to balance. All right, when you put it in one place, there's a part of the world that's going to get kind of screwed over in terms of timing, and that's another thing too. In the U.S., all the events are going to be in the middle of the night for the most part. So and that's what stinks. But someone has to, because if it's going to be here, then China and Japan, they have to go and watch the events during the middle of the night. So it's just the way time works. But so I'm not really going to complain about that. I do think one of the interesting things moving forward, I just looked it up. The 2026 Winter Olympics are in Milan, Italy. So that'll be it. I think that'll be a pretty cool Winter Olympics to watch with the Swiss Alps and all in those areas.
So, so it's interesting that 2022 is kind of the end of the era of the major sporting events being on the east side of the world.
Yeah, for the
With
foreseeable future, at
Russia,
least.
Russia war.
But
I was gonna say with they started with the 2018 World Cup in Russia, then Tokyo Olympics, then the even Sochi Winter Olympics, then the Beijing Winter Olympics, and now Qatar World Cup was on the east, and now all the events gonna go back to the west with the Milan Winter Olympics, Paris Summer Olympics, and the U.S., Mexico, and Canada World Cup.
right. Absolutely. So it's really interesting to see how they're moving forward, and I'm interested to see if just which cities even bid in the future for it, because I think we've seen a lot of disasters over the past 20 years with, like, you think about Brazil, South Africa, where they did all kinds of infrastructure projects, but unfortunately those countries didn't really receive the long-term benefits that they were hoping for. So I really do think you're going to see mostly just developed countries going for it. But I do think for a country like China, uh, they're going to try to go for it multiple times just because it gives them international legitimacy. And because right now, like China, from a geopolitical standpoint, they're trying to overtake the U.S. as the global superpower. That's their ultimate goal. And events like the Olympics help with that.
Oh yeah, that's their project. Starting with the 2008 Summer Olympics. It's kind of their brand. I wouldn't be surprised if they tried to pursue the hosting the World Cup. I don't believe. I was kind of expecting that because of the so much investment was made into the Chinese Super League. In the last 5 years, but now the investment kind of tie it down a little, and now they're trying to invest more into their own athletes. So now the teams itself are kind of going bankrupt or kind of paying way less than they used to. But I think China wants to invest more in the global scheme, using more sports than soccer itself. Like, but it's going to be interesting to see him. But can it, but speaking of events, definitely I'm excited of the World Cup this year, because first it's going to be in November, not in the summer. It's going to be in the winter in America, not in the summer. So it's going to be, for the Americans, it's going to be a big competition of attention, because it's going to be in the middle of the NFL season with also NBA, NHL happening. I mean, for Brazil, it's going to be all eyes on the World Cup, because even the season is going to end before the World Cup starts. That's what the Brazilian Confederation is pushing for. And of course, all the pressures on Brazil, because it has been 20 years since Brazil last won the World Cup in 2002. And since then, Brazil was eliminated 3 times in the quarterfinals and 1 time in the semifinals, all by European teams. So Brazil has to kind of defeat an European team, because that has been their Achilles heel. Because with France 2006, uh, Netherlands 2010, German 2014, and then Belgium 2018 was 4 eliminations by 4 European countries. So Brazil is in a big pressure to win in 2022, with Neymar being the super star of this upcoming World Cup. Even I think bigger than Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo, because both of them are in by the last or second last World Cup. I think Neymar still has 3 World Cups minimum to play.
Yeah, I think there's a ton of countries that have a lot of pressure on them. Yeah, I think Brazil this year. I think the United Kingdom, no, England has a ton of pressure because they came so close to win the Euros last year. They went to the semis 4 years ago in Russia. Um, how much hunger do they have with their current core? I think that's a lot of pressure on them. I think there's a lot of pressure on like an Italy. They won the Euros, and we've seen recently winning the Euros seems to propel a team to winning it in the World Cup, or at least a great deep run propels you to that type of run. Um, I think also a team like Belgium. I mean, Belgium has had a great team for years at this point, just hasn't been able to win anything. And you do have to wonder, when is their window going to shut? And obviously France, they've still got a great team. Will they be able to go back to back? It's really hard to do that. And then, coming back here to the U.S., obviously the main goal is just making it. You don't want to go back to back World Cups with missing it, and I don't think they're going to, because they've been playing a lot better over the past year. They've beat Mexico a couple of times for various trophies, the Gold Cup and the Nations Cup. But obviously goal number one is just making it. But then, you're right. Since it is in a different part of the sports calendar, the U.S. men's team really needs to get to at least the knockout stage if possible. Obviously, we'll see what the group stage is going to be, what draw they get. I think the goal needs to be at least a group of 16 appearance for the U.S. men's team, because that's going to build up excitement for the 2026 World Cup. And this year is going to be the most critical year of U.S. soccer perhaps ever, because you need that excitement to build up for the World Cup that we're going to host. Because I think that's when our team's going to be at its best potential to make a deep run. When hosting it here on our home soil with a lot of really talented players, a new generation that should be beginning to mature by that point. And so this year is just simply getting experience, meaning you have to get to Qatar. If we're sitting home in November, December, then I think that's going to completely derail whatever goals we have for 2026, because I think that's when U.S. soccer really make a move. And if you can make a deep run at home in 2026, then I think soccer will become firmly entrenched in the American sports market and really help the U.S. become competitive each and every World Cup, starting in the 2030s to 2040s. This is what I'm thinking. This is our golden opportunity to go from just, hey, we're happy to be here, to it's time to actually compete, because the U.S. should have all the resources. We're in the United States, and that, I know that's going to sound arrogant, but you know the soccer is the one sport where we seemingly just cannot compete. In terms for winning championships. But I think the infrastructure has been there. Soccer has started to get popular over 20, 30 years. And now is the time where you got to make the move towards being competitive for 2026.
Oh, I agree. And, by looking at the scenario of the CONCACAF qualifying, it's interesting that the three countries that are going to host the World Cup in 2026, they are leading the third round. Canada being the first, United States second, Mexico third, Panama fourth. But then after that, it's a 5 point difference to Costa Rica. And, with only a few matches left, I don't think they're going to lose that edge. I believe. I think Canada, United States, and Mexico are going to make it. And I think Panama is going to go to uh, the playoff interconfederation versus the winner in the Oceania Confederation. But I'm surprised about Canada. They are really, I think Canada is using better the MLS to strengthen their soccer than US, I believe, because the growth was, Canada was relevant if you say 8 years ago compared to today. I mean, today they're going to make it the World Cup. They have Alfonso Davis. They have a lot of new talent coming up. So I think they were able to use the MLS to strengthen their soccer, and now they're going to host the World Cup also in 2026 along Mexico, United States. So I imagine the excitement for the Canadians, making the World Cup after so many decades. They're going to be back to back in the World Cup. So I think the United States have to also get this perspective that like not the Canada is even Canada is catching up to them.
Yeah, and obviously for Canada too. I think everything I said about the U.S. also applies to Canada. This is a chance for them to just jumpstart being competitive, because they haven't been to the World Cup since 1986. You get that guaranteed appearance in 4 years for it'll be your first World Cup appearance in 40 years. We'll see what they are going to be able to do with that. Obviously for Mexico too. Mexico. They've been to well, they've had what 7 straight exits in their group of 16, like which is what 30 like 28 years where they can't get past that round. So maybe being able to host helps you get over that plateau.
Yeah, and the last, the some exits were traumatic. 2002 to US, I believe, was that was one of the biggest games in US soccer history. World Cup, they lost to Brazil. I think they played well. I think Brazil took advantage, you know, in the counterattacks. But that's true. Mexico has, and to finally get through that round of 32 to make it at least to the quarterfinals. And advance because Mexican soccer has been developing over the years, attracting really interesting players. The league is richer. Even they used to be like when the FIFA World Cup, when it was the new kind of format that was developed in 2005, where the Mexican CONCACAF teams and other confederation teams were added. Brazilian teams were always advanced over the Mexican teams, but now that doesn't happen anymore. Last competition earlier last year, Palmeiras were eliminated to Tigres of Mexico, and now they're gonna Pachuca is going to be the one representing Mexico. So also, Mexican teams were able to also, make a bigger stage in the clubs kind of, World Cup. So now they have to look at that and be like, we can also make it into the FIFA World Cup, like the nations one.
Yeah, but I think also too what we haven't discussed is teams in the Middle East. Because this is a Middle Eastern World Cup. I believe it's the first one held in that region of the world. So obviously for Qatar, they haven't. I don't know if they've ever even been to the World Cup. I don't think they have. But obviously this is just a
No,
huge
never,
opportunity.
never.
So obviously this is a huge opportunity for them. Can they kind of pull off what Russia did a couple of years ago and go on a deep run? I don't know about it, but because I remember watching them a couple of years ago and they didn't look half bad to me. So I do think that, hey, maybe they can pull off an upset or two, and at least give their home crowd something to be excited about. But I think about one team that kind of I just have a feeling about is Egypt. Because I know they didn't play well in 2018, but they got Mohamed Salah, and I know he didn't have a ton of help otherwise. But that's obviously Egypt was very close to Qatar, and you know I feel like they're going to want to kind of show out in the Arabian World Cup. Uh, I think maybe a team like Saudi Arabia if they make it. Uh, yeah, it's just I don't know. Is there like a team like Iran? And they made it a couple of years ago. Let's say Algeria. They've had a couple of good showings. Is there any like team in the Arabian
I
world
mean,
that you think?
Algeria really.
Is there any team in the Arabian world that you think could make some noise here at in Qatar?
Algeria gave Germany a scare in 2014. Germany had to go to overtime to beat Algeria. Even it was funny that Brazilians make fun like Algeria gave a harder time than Brazil gave in the 2014 World Cup. But that's Egypt, of course, going to be the most talked nation in the Middle East in the World Cup. But Salah, has this controversy, even consider quitting the Egypt national team, because of some political reasons. But I think he definitely don't want to miss playing a World Cup in kind of his kind of in his home continent.
Yeah, in that part of the world. So because you know all those teams are going to come with a chip on their shoulder because they don't want just the South American and European teams to show up and dominate like they always do. And obviously Asian teams, just in general, like Japan's, South Korea's, because especially South Korea had a horrible 2018 World Cup. So they're going to want to show some redemption in 2022. Japan, I mean, they got up 2-0 on Belgium, but kind of let that game get away from them in 2018. So they're going to want to kind of show up. So I think there's a lot of really intriguing storylines here. Australia too. Like they did not play
Yeah.
well at all in 2018. So so we'll see if Oceania, Australia, New Zealand, if they can kind of roar back and be competitive here in 2022. So there's interesting storylines in every single continent of the world to me, and that's what's going to make this very fascinating. Of course, obviously we'll have to see how I'm able to balance, focusing on that, but and then focusing on the NFL and college football. So for the American audience, I'm very curious to see how this affects ratings. Of course, Fox has the rights here in America, so I'm very curious to see how they handle Um, balancing NFL coverage with World Cup coverage. But one thing I think they can definitely do is request that the U.S. gets scheduled on Thanksgiving. I really hope that the U.S. makes it to the World Cup. One of their World Cup games is on Thanksgiving because that would be a huge deal for the U.S. men's soccer team.
But do you think Americans would switch to watching football to watching soccer in on things? I mean, I think it would be kind of symbolic if that happens, with the nation, the national team.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely depends, right? It depends on what games. Obviously, the Lions and Cowboys always play early on. I'll be very interested to see just how this is going to unfold. Because I believe the Fox should have the 4:30 game. They should have the Cowboys game this year because they played the Lions this year. So, if they can, they'll probably try to put them on at like noon or 1 p.m. or something like that, opposite the Lions. And honestly, I'd rather watch U.S. men's soccer team than the Lions. Uh, and that, of course, you never know. The Lions might be amazing next year, but I I severely doubt that.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. And in Brazil, Global is going to be the right holding the TV rights. Of course, they always has been, but they lost the streaming rights, and they're you know and Global is not as big, powerful TV as they were in the last 10 years or even 40 years. But I think Brazilians, they don't care what time, because in Brazil, especially when the Brazilian national team play, is holiday. People don't go to work. They kind of have a day off just to watch. And normally is in July. So the school's on vacation anyway. I wonder what schools are going to do. And they're going to be definitely the gatherings to watch. And, Brazil right now is kind of easing COVID restrictions, but I'm excited. Of course, the World Cup is in, you know, this year. It's going to be very interesting. In terms of the nations that are still, you know, trying to make it to World Cup, Egypt is, I think, heavily favorite. In the the African side, along Algeria, Cameroon, Ghana, and in the Asia side, you see that's interesting. The last side is Japan and Saudi Arabia taking the lead. Australia at 1 point behind, and in the Group A, Iran, South Korea, and United Arabic Emirates can also make it. So some interesting nations there, but normally the biggest one they always make it through. But in terms of not international events, more national events. Of course, the 2022 you have the Super Bowl, the national championship in early year, then the March Madness going back to the I think original form. And what are you excited most about the 2022 in America sports?
Obviously, Super Bowl coming up. I think it's going to be a very entertaining playoffs. I don't know who's going to make it to Los Angeles because national championships next Monday night in Indianapolis. March Madness, I think, will be a traditional March Madness again, and that will be fun to have the crowds back, to have it all over the country. Although I think it is perhaps, it was an interesting idea having it all in one area last year, but I think it's better just for the sport to have it all over the country. And then just kind of looking around, of course, you got the NBA Finals and the Stanley Cup Finals, both returning back to June, like we had in the past. Although I personally think the NBA Finals should move back to August. I thought that was just a better time. There's less downtime between that and the NFL season. But alas, we're going to go back to having very little in the middle of the summer outside of golf and tennis and all that, because we got Wimbledon, and all
And
of that.
the big question is, MLB new collective bargaining agreement is going to be done before the season starts. I think that's the big
Yeah,
question
that.
for 2022 in terms of American sports.
Hey, I'll just say this. I wouldn't mind being the reigning world champion for 2 years as a Braves fan, but at the same time, I do want to see baseball be played this year. Uh, so I hope they can get it figured out. But I wouldn't be shocked if we don't see baseball this year, just because the MLBPA and the MLB just can't get along on anything. I mean, going back to COVID, when the whole thing started back in 2020, I mean, we covered just how nasty that was back then, and it just continues to just get worse, it seems. So hopefully they can figure something out, but I severely doubt it. Well, I mean, I don't doubt it. I don't know what the exact odds are, but it will be interesting to see how that moves forward in terms of everything. And I do, and just in terms of like stuff I'm looking forward to. Obviously, a NASCAR season starts next month. I'm a big NASCAR guy. They're doing an LA Clash. Well, basically, they're racing inside the USC football stadium. That's going to be really interesting. Of course, they're debuting the new car this year. So just start with the Daytona 500. How does that go to race? That will be very intriguing. We're going to Indianapolis 500 back on Memorial Day weekend for the second straight year, finally. So that will be exciting. And there's just all kinds of little events in between, right? Got college baseball coming back here very soon. Here, I believe, starting next month. Obviously, you have all the different golf tournaments. So the Masters is April 7th for the 10th. That's always a big deal. The U.S. PGA is in Oklahoma this year, so a huge deal for Oklahoma to have that particular tournament. There's the let's see, where's the other one? You have the President's Cup in North Carolina. The Ryder Cup's going to be in Rome this year. So a lot of really interesting events, because obviously the two major international ones, the Winter Olympics and the FIFA World Cup. But outside of that, we'll both have a lot of individual little events to talk about throughout the course of the season. But like in Brazil, like what are you looking forward to?
I mean, I'm looking forward definitely to have a normal season again, starting in January, finishing the end of the year. I I'm looking forward to a more competitive Brazilian soccer because, of course, Flamengo, Atlético Mineiro, and Palmeiras is still going to be the dominating teams. But Corinthians look like they're getting stronger, and you have Sao Paulo and Santos and Fluminense, which big question marks. Are they going to be strong or are they going to be mediocre? And looking forward, of course, to some local, sports. Of course, I always follow the, second and third division of São Paulo State leagues, which always is one of the hardest soccer tournaments in the world because it's so it's so like it's so leveled. But in terms, I think I look forward to have a see a better more competitive soccer, which now has come back to normal season from January until November. But and I'm also this year is going to be interesting because Brazil has last year approved a new law that allows soccer teams act as private entities and have owners. So Brazil right now is turning like the American sports kind of configuration, with owners, like not like with the way that I explained before, with like they're not run as more like a non-private company, not a non-profit company. They're gonna have owners. If Cruzeiro is one of them, Botafogo, I think Cuiabá in the first division, but several are gonna follow through. I think it'll be interesting to see what having owners in soccer in Brazil is going to do for the sport. If hopefully they'll turn into more competitive, more stronger league, but we'll see what one of the owners is Ronaldo. The famous Ronaldo that played for Real Madrid, Barcelona. He bought his the team that projected him into soccer, Cruzeiro. The first team he ever played in 1993, he bought for 400 million reais in December. So I'm looking forward to see what those owners are going to do for the Brazilian soccer.
Yeah, obviously, anytime you have a new law like that, you don't know what the unintended consequences are moving forward. So I don't think it'll be just for this year, but just over the next 5-10 years. I'm very curious to see how that affects soccer in Brazil. But obviously, we'll be talking about all these things throughout the course of 2022. But now it's time to get into some American and Brazilian topics. And, do you want to go first with the Brazilian topics?
Yeah, sounds good. It's real quick, since we're still in off season, the real season starts in mid January. Some state tournaments probably going to start January 20th in Sao Paulo, where I live, is going to start January 26th. And just some like off season topics. Current Brazilian champion Atlético Mineiro uh, is going to have to find a new coach since Cuca resigned due to personal and family reasons. I think they're gonna really try to get former Flamengo head coach Jorge Jesus, the businessman who kind of run Atlético Mineiro right now. They went to Portugal trying to persuade him to coach Atlético Mineiro. But the biggest soap opera of December was Flamengo's finding a new head coach because uh, Flamengo, fired Renato Gaúcho in late November after he lost the Libertadores final, and then they went all the front office of Flamengo went to Portugal trying to convince Jorge Jesus to coach Flamengo. He was still the coach of Benfica, but Benfica was playing hard to get. He's saying like, "Hey, if Jorge Jesus, if you want to leave, you have to pay your fine. You have to, you have to pay us the to break the contract." He didn't want to, and then Flamengo gave up on Jorge Jesus and decided to hire former Polish national team head coach, the Portuguese Paulo Souza. He doesn't have a ton of experience, but he seems like a very interesting profile. He is kind of like a new kind of new this new kind of mentality of soccer. And of course, Flamengo wanted to get another Portuguese coach since they couldn't get their number one target, Jorge Jesus. So it was a big soap opera. The Polish Confederation wasn't happy about it. Of course, they said, they felt betrayed. Paulo Souza kind of pay off the remainder of the contract to coach Flamengo. But the question is Flamengo are going to get over not having Jorge Jesus? That's what everybody asking because Jorge Jesus is still beloved by the fans. They still remember all he did in 2019. Winning the Libertadores, the Brazilian national championship, and the state championship. But he needs Flamengo fans needs to understand that Jorge Jesus is a very diva coach, and the timing wasn't right. When the Flamengo front office tried to lure him to coach Flamengo, he was still with Benfica, and then Benfica fired him after Flamengo hired Paulo Souza, and now looks like Jorge Jesus gonna at least consider coaching Atlético Mineiro. So it's gonna be an interesting dynamic in terms of coaches in Brazil, and that will be my hot take in terms of this kind of obsession with coaches from Portugal in Brazilian soccer. But that's the latest news out of Brazilian soccer and Brazilian sports.
Yeah, obviously, the whole Polish story sounds like something that would happen in college football in terms of the drama. It just shows you that country to country sports really just never change.
Yeah, yeah. When of course, for Paulo Souza, coaching Flamengo was way more interesting than coaching the Polish national team because Flamengo, if he does well, it projects him not only into a South American market but European market. Because Jorge Jesus, when he went to Flamengo, he he wasn't much, he wasn't seem like very a good coach in Portugal anymore. He was kind of seemed done, and then he did a good job in Brazil. He went back to Benfica, so that's what Paulo Souza wants to kind of revamp, and kind of promote his career using one of the largest South American soccer teams, Flamengo.
Yeah, I mean you can't blame him because obviously, as I've learned, the Flamengo is one of the top clubs in Brazil, and I know things didn't necessarily go their way last year, so I know they want to get back on top. And Brazilian soccer, so see what they're able to do in 2022. But now it's time to get into some American topics, and this will take a bit because there's a lot. It's going to be all football today, just because we are in the middle of college football bowl and playoff season, and we're getting into NFL playoff season. So there's a lot to break down. And I personally had two different experiences over the past week. So we'll start off with college first. I went to the Music City Bowl between Tennessee and Purdue. Obviously, we both covered the Vols. I'm an alum of Tennessee, and Tennessee got totally hosed, totally robbed of a victory against Purdue. Well, actually, I don't know if we would have won ultimately, but I do think that whatever chance that Tennessee did have was taken away. Now, I will say this: you can't absolve Tennessee of their probability of losing this game. The defense was horrible, not necessarily completely their fault. They had some people opt out of the game, and their depth was not there. But still, you gotta ultimately stop the opposing team with the people that you have, and the Vols just were not able to do it. There were some questionable decisions potentially. I personally agreed with all the times that Josh Heupel went for it on fourth down in the fourth quarter and overtime, just because I think the defense wasn't playing well enough to trust them. But I think the one thing that stands out to me about the decision making, so the Vols got the ball back with about a minute left, and they were at the 40-yard line, and they needed to go about 20 or 30 yards to get Chase McGrath, our kicker, into field goal range. And for some reason, we ran the ball twice and didn't take any timeouts because we go very quickly. We snap the ball every 8 to 10 seconds. But when you have a minute left, even when you go that fast, time management is a big deal. And there's been some other times this year where it feels like Josh Heupel is trusting his system over traditional time management, and it kind of came back to bite us here. Now, that wasn't the whole reason why we lost. Another big reason why the Vols lost is because of the second quarter, the Vols just got totally blown out, 16-0 in that quarter, because they were up 21-7 after the first, but the offense kind of went quiet in the second quarter, and Purdue just was moving the ball out well, and the defense was kind of keeping them at bay. They were keeping them out of the end zone, but right before halftime, they got a touchdown to go up 23-21 at the half, and then we were stuck in a barn burner. I'll say this: the whole second half and overtime was one of the most intense football games I've ever been to. I think it was the most intense football game I've ever been to, and unfortunately, we just didn't come out on top. The whole section out that was around me was just despondent. We're very upset with how the game ended, but yeah, at some point, right, you just got to kind of accept when things like that happen, because they happen a lot to Tennessee, and it stinks, and college football officiating stinks. Because basically the rule is you can't pull a player into the end zone, but you can push a player into the end zone. So I don't understand why there's a differentiation there. I don't know why all of a sudden playing to the whistle no longer matters. Because if the official thinks, oh, forward progress up there, plays over, even if no whistle is is blown, because that is just basic football. For 150 years, it's all been about playing to the whistle. And now all of a sudden, it doesn't matter if you play to the whistle. It doesn't make any sense. So, I don't know. Tennessee got hosed. Even people who normally hate on Tennessee are saying Tennessee got hosed, which that's when you know Tennessee really got hosed, when people who hate Tennessee say that Tennessee got hosed, because obviously Tennessee fans, we don't make it easy for people to like us. But, I'll still say overall 21 is a success. I didn't think this team was going to make a bowl game, but they proved me wrong. They were entertaining to watch. They put up 538 points this year, the most in school history. So I'm very excited to see what Josh Heupel does in year two. Of course, you got Hooker coming back, got Cedric Tillman, Jamari Spall, and the backfield. He had 180 yards rushing in this game. The big question for me is what's going to happen with this defense. We got to get some more pieces. We got to get some depth. But if that can happen, then I think the Vols could be decent next year. I think 8 wins is very possible. Maybe more than that. I think some people think maybe 10-2 is possible, but I got to see what we do with the defense first.
And I think Josh Heupel can use what happened in the Music City Bowl as kind of like a motivation. Like, hey, we got robbed. Let's prove, next year that we can be better. I think Josh Heupel definitely was able to turn around very well. I think because the last season, Tennessee football was very not interesting and very disappointing. I think this year was an interesting team. I think the way the season ended wasn't the way the Vol fan wanted, but not because of the way the team played, but was officiating decisions. But I think that will give more motivation for next season.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this team will do that because I think if we're looking throughout that how they played this year, they always seem to play a lot better after a loss. Like they always came out motivated, and just think about they get hosed against Ole Miss, they go down to Tuscaloosa next week and take it into the fourth quarter against a team that might be about ready to win a national title. You know, they never played really two bad games in a row this year, and that's really encouraging. Um, I do think there is some adjustments that Heupel should make to his philosophy in order to truly be championship contenders in the SEC. I do think that perhaps he does believe in a system a wee bit too much in certain situations. Like, for example, my main gripe with the play calling is on third and fourth and shorts. We always seem to try to run the ball at the middle. And to his credit, the play calling did change a little bit by the end of the game. But and I'll say this, I love aggressive coaching, so I don't have a problem for going for it in those situations. But you got to have the play calling to go with the aggressiveness, and it just wasn't there at times throughout the season because it wasn't the only game, or this wasn't the only game where that reared its ugly head. So I don't know, but I do. I'm very excited, and I think that's the number one thing. Just that being there, Tennessee fans are very excited about our program right now, and even with this loss, it doesn't damper it, in my opinion. Like I was mad for about 10 minutes, but then afterwards, I'm like, okay, I wasn't expecting to even be here at a bowl game. So, I'll take it. I'll take the entertaining season. It's way better than the Jeremy Pruitt era. It's way better than, well, okay, the Hyla Jones era is pretty fun, but definitely way better than anything we saw in Jeremy Pruitt. We got a competent quarterback now, got a competent head coach. Recruiting is going decently well. I mean, we're definitely not championship contenders. We're not continuing with Alabama or Georgia anytime soon. But that's not even what I want. I just want to be competitive. I want to be the balls to be fun to watch, and because that's the first step. You got to be consistently winning 8, 9 games a year anyway, before you can even think about being a championship contender, and that's going to be multiple years away. Any last thoughts on the Vols?
I mean, I feel like, definitely it was the most exciting first year head coach, I believe, since maybe Lane Kiffin, maybe even maybe I think Lane Kiffin was the last time Vols fans were excited. Of course, he turned this excitement into disappointment real quick.
Right.
But I, yeah, so but I believe Tennessee football can compete. You know, I mean, not with the other two SEC foes there are making a national title anytime soon, but I can see in 2 or 3 years maybe getting closer.
Yeah, I think it'll take a little bit longer than that because we still have to wait and see what the NCAA does with the Vols. So but I don't think they'll be that bad, honestly, in terms of the infractions, because I think the Vols did a lot of the Vols have, done a lot of stuff to themselves. They had a lot of penalties basically, and they lost a whole recruiting class basically due to this. So, you know, that's just my message to other Vol fans who may be watching this: pump the brakes a little bit. We're not winning a national or SEC title next year, as much as I would love to believe so. But I do think it's going to be very fun to watch, and I do expect like an 8-4 season, something like that, um, in 2022. But maybe we'll be better than that. But moving on just to bowl games in general, and that's really obviously we got to talk about the playoffs, and it was this newser. I turned off Georgia Michigan by halftime. Alabama Cincinnati was more interesting out of the two, which was surprising. But Cincinnati never really had a shot there. The offense just couldn't do anything against Alabama. Bama's offense just kind of just was run, run, run because Cincinnati has a really good secondary, but they couldn't stop the running game. It's Alabama Georgia again. It's just boring. It's because it really that college football at this point, out of all the major sports in America, has the worst postseason. It does, and that really sucks. But every other sport has an exciting conclusion to their season. But college football stinks right now in terms of its posting. Like the regular season is incredible, but I don't know how you fix this because of the rest of the bowl games got people opting out, and you can't really blame them because we saw what happened with Matt Corral on New Year's night in the Sugar Bowl. He got hurt, so we'll see how that affects his draft stock. But it stinks right now. Like I don't know how you fix bowl season. I don't know how you fix the playoffs. And I think part of it is just Alabama and Georgia are so much better than everyone else. But how do you got to find a way to increase the parity? You got to find a way to make and to make it competitive because it may just be biased because Tennessee's a rival of Alabama and Georgia, so I hate the fact that one of our rivals is going to be a national champion next Monday night. But it just it's just not exciting to me anymore. Because like all I really care about at this point is Tennessee. Like, how do we do? Like, I don't care who wins next week in Indianapolis because who cares? Those two teams are going to be back next year. What are your thoughts, guys? Like,
I think Georgia definitely really needs to win because the Kirby Smart, if they lose it again, it's going to be the second time he lost to Nick Saban in a national championship and with a better team. I think Georgia has proven all season they are better than Alabama, but definitely college football playoff. And it's not about the committee. Of course, the committee has done some questionable decisions over the years, but it's about parity. Only the first national championship under the college football playoff did not had any SEC teams. All the rest had SEC teams, and it's going to be the second time since the college football playoffs there are going to be a matchup between two SEC teams with the same, Alabama and Georgia. So I think SEC is getting stronger. Look how many SEC teams made to the bowl games. I think the conference itself is getting stronger, and other conferences are getting weaker. I think the ACC definitely was the weakest conference, definitely with Clemson taking a major step back. I think Big Ten kind of still staying the same relevance. Michigan made it first time and definitely couldn't handle Georgia. That proves that Jim Harbaugh has a lot of work to do down in Ann Arbor. But congratulations to the Cincinnati Bearcats. I don't think they're losing to Alabama. They not say, oh, look what happened when a program outside of the Power Five, make it. They made it. They deserve to be there, and they play, to the same level. Let's say to the Notre Dame team last year.
yeah, I mean, no other team would have done better against Alabama. Like, let's be honest. Like, Notre Dame would not have done better against Alabama. Um, Ohio State might have done better against Alabama, but you didn't even go to your conference title game, so they didn't deserve to be there. Um, Clearly, the four-team format that we have right now is just not working. So I think you have two options. You can either contract back to the BCS and have two teams, which then again would have been Michigan and Alabama would have steamrolled Michigan. But at the very least, you have gotten, I think, some better bowl matchups. He'll go back to pre-BCS entirely, where the national title was determined by poll writers, which I don't think anyone really wants to do. But that's when college football really was at its peak. When you had um, the emphasis on traditions, on conference titles, on rivalries. But think about it, like it's and I made a TikTok about this a couple of weeks ago because I did one of those trends where like what could you talk about for hours? And one of the topics I put was why ESPN is ruining college football. And I kind of did a video about this where I think that ESPN's desire to turn college football into a mini NFL has severely ruined college football because everything's about the playoffs. So they built up the entire year to the playoffs. And the unfortunate problem is, unlike the NFL, where you got 14 teams that make it, the NBA playoffs, where you have over half the league making it, the MLB, where you have 10 teams making it, the NHL, you have over half the teams making it. In college football, out of 130 teams, you only have 4 teams making it. And from the first 2 to 3 weeks, over half the teams are done. And most teams know off bat they don't have any shot. So what are they playing for? And that kind of goes back into the opt-outs situation. What exactly is a meaningless game? Because right now, it's become totally acceptable for players to not play in bowl games. And honestly, I'm fine with it. Like I think you got to prioritize yourself. You got to prioritize your family. A lot of these players come from nothing. They are the ticket for their family to get out of generational poverty and to perhaps build a better future for themselves and their future children and their family, because it can change the entire their entire lives. So why would you run out there and play for next to nothing in the Sugar Bowl in a game that doesn't have a title associated to it, um, and get yourself hurt? And that's what happened to Matt Corral. And I really hope it doesn't hurt his draft stock, but it could, because NFL teams look into that. And I don't know where the line stops, because I think meaningless games are going to only expand. Because think about it, if you have two losses by the end of September, you're not making the playoffs. So why are you still playing? How long before we see? Let's say Tennessee loses to Florida really bad, and I'm like, okay, well Tennessee can't win the SEC East now, so I'm gone. I'm not going to play anymore because I have done enough as a draft as an athlete to prove that I belong in the NFL. So I'm just gonna get off the football field and train. Especially when look at some of the rookies that are doing amazing this year in the NFL. Micah Parsons, potential defensive player of the year, did not play last year at Penn State. Jamar Chase, best rookie receiver in the NFL right now, had 3 receiving touchdowns, over 250 yards yesterday for the Bengals. Did not play last year for LSU. These guys are proving that a year off isn't going to hurt them. They can take a whole year off from football, come back and be just as good, if not better. They have less wear and tear on themselves, making them more valuable for the NFL teams that draft them, because that's where they're going to get paid. And even with NIL, the deals that you're going to get, like think about it, the max deal I've heard in college football is $1 million for Bryce Young. But why would he go back and play at Alabama next year for $1 million when he could just wait an extra year and wait for the $50 million waiting for him in the NFL? So, just do the math. Like, it's not economically responsible for a draftable athlete to play in college football, which really, really is going to hurt college football. And you got to figure out a way to make it more of an incentive for the college athlete to play, not just in bowl season, because that's where opt-outs are happening now. But I think it's going to happen beyond opt-outs. I think it's going to kind of merge into the regular season. And heck, at some point, is it going to merge into the playoffs? I have a chance to play for a national title, but is it really worth blowing the millions of dollars I could make in the future? That's the question a lot of people are going to have to ask themselves moving forward.
Is this the beginning of what's happening right now, the relationship between the professional basketball and the college basketball world? I know even seen the NBA itself, but professional basketball players, they want to go overseas or you go straight to the G League instead of playing college basketball. So I think it's kind of what's probably going to happen to the NFL. Let's give some shout out: Luis Matos, Silvio Massimo, Graziella, watching us here in Brazil. Appreciate you guys watching us here in our podcast. But for me, definitely, I understand the players. I think Matt Corral injury playing for the Ole Miss just shows, and how, and I think those big bowl games, if they're smart, you can turn those games into playoffs. Why only 2 bowl games gonna have playoff implications? Why not make more bowl games playoff implications?
Like literally, if you do a 12-team playoff, literally all 6 of the New Year's 6 could each be a bowl game or each be a playoff game, because 4 of them could be the quarterfinals, 2 of them could be the semis, and then 1 be a national title. But then the argument is, okay, so you bring in 12 teams, how much more competitive could it be? Which I will say, I do think it would be more competitive, because think about Utah, Ohio State, for example. That game was incredible in the Rose Bowl, but that could have been a quarterfinal match or a first-round game. And
Oklahoma State and Notre Dame was a very incredible game. The way the Cowboys kind of came back and won the game. Those two.
And even if Alabama and Georgia are dominating, at least there's going to be several playoff games where neither of them are going to be in it. So you at least would have other great games, and who knows, maybe another team gets hot and can challenge Alabama or Georgia. because that's what happens in March Madness. Like, imagine if we only take the top 4 college basketball teams in March Madness. Like, yeah, it'd be Duke, Kentucky every single year, right? It wouldn't be as exciting as what it is now because you never know
I mean,
when
but
which
no,
top
it's
teams
interesting.
will run.
But it's interesting. College basketball right now is as parity as is possible. You don't know who's gonna make it into the national title. You don't know if Baylor and Gonzaga are gonna go again.
Right. I mean, that's
So
the thing
college
because you
basketball has
have
the
so many.
parity that college football does not.
Yeah, because they give so many teams a chance at it. So you never know who's going to do it. In college football, that access is purposefully denied for all these bowl interests. And that's really the problem here. The bowl game interests are keeping the postseason from being great. And really, like, especially like the Rose Bowl, their influence has to be countered because they're preventing college football from being the sport that it could be. Because the regular season's amazing, but the postseason is holding it back. And it is time for everything to be changed about the postseason. Like, throw everything out. And I've heard some suggestions. Like, I heard one person suggest that maybe, kind of do away with conference affiliations with bowl games. I think that's a fantastic idea. Like, kind of get interesting matchups. Like, I think about like a Florida UCF, for example. Like, that was a fantastic matchup just because those two fan bases don't like each other. They're in the same state. They had, they had they had agreed to a game, but then Florida didn't want to play it, so Florida was seen as weak. So then UCF was finally able to play them and was able to beat them. Then about next year, if Oklahoma and USC were to play in a bowl game, like imagine Oklahoma playing against Lincoln Riley. Like that would be an entertaining game because there's a storyline. Most of these bowl games don't have storylines. And because like Tennessee Purdue, right, was a fantastic game, but there's no storylines. Like Tennessee Purdue don't
Yeah,
play each other. Like who
like
cares?
for
Like
example, Penn State, Arkansas in the Outback Bowl. I'm sorry, I
who
don't
cares?
think neither. Yeah,
Kentucky,
Iowa, Iowa, yeah,
yeah, Michigan, Penn State, or Michigan State, Michigan State, Pittsburgh. Who cares? Like these games don't mean anything because there isn't a storyline. You don't have that backup. Like Florida, UCF, yeah, those are not two very good teams, but they had storylines. Like I had a reason to watch. So yeah, I don't know how you fix it. Of course, we can talk about Bama and Georgia in a little bit. I do think Bama's going to win again. I don't trust Stetson Bennett, like because I think it's going to come down to quarterback play again. And Bryce Young's just way better than Stetson Bennett. I'm sorry. I know he played well against Michigan, but I think he's just gonna crap the bed again against Bama. Just in my personal opinion.
I hope Georgia wins, but in the end, Alabama heavily favorite, solidifying Nick Saban's. I think we can all say he's the greatest college football quarterback, college football head coach of all time. I mean, he back-to-back national championships. He can win back-to-back. I think he still haven't won back-to-back national championships, right?
I think he did. No. He did it in 2011, 2012. He did it back-to-back then, I believe. But he's won 7 and 13. So let me just make sure of that. But I'm pretty sure he went back-to-back and 11 and 12. Yeah, so he's won it. He's won 2003, 09, 11, 12, 15, 17, and 20. So if he wins next week, that's his 8th national championship. So, I mean, I think, especially in this era of college football with the level of athlete, I mean, he's the GOAT already. So it's just, we're just living in Nick Saban's world until he decides to retire, unfortunately.
Or I don't understand why any NFL team would think about hire him. Because if Urban Meyer got a chance, why not Nick Saban? He didn't do a bad job in
Why would
Miami.
he leave Alabama? Like he is a god in the state of Alabama. I would not leave that if I'm Nick Saban to go to the NFL. Would.
I mean, I would understand if he leaves because he's a person who won a challenge. I think I would go to the NFL because he still has the energy to prove he can win not only in college but in the NFL. That's why I would have think Nick Saban probably.
I mean, I would love for him to leave, but he isn't going to. So because I
I
think
think
he's
I
been
think the person who really wants him to retire or leave Alabama is Dabo Sweeney. He's can't wait to be the next Alabama head
okay.
coach.
Here's a hot take with Dabo Swinney. I think Clemson's going to start falling off. I really do, because if you look at Clemson, I think the main reason why they've been so good over the past couple of years is because of Trevor Lawrence and Deshaun Watson. I I really think that he isn't able to get it done if he doesn't have an NFL quarterback like Nick Saban has been able to. Because now Nick Saban's been able to have an NFL quarterback. But remember, the first part of that run, he didn't really have great quarterbacks. He's having like Greg McElroy and Blake Sims and quarterbacks like that. So I do think that that Dabo Swinney still is like half the coach that Nick Saban is, and he will. And I think he'll actually fall back to earth, unlike Nick Saban. And as you said, this one's huge for Kirby. Like if Kirby can't get this one done, I mean, this is the greatest defense he'll probably ever have. Because like every single one of their top seven of their front seven is probably going in the top 100 in the NFL draft. He cannot screw this up. So we'll see what happens. But then again, I think he's made a massive error going with Stetson Bennett. So we'll see if he can pull it off. But let's move on to some NFL talk. Of course, I got to see these guys play yesterday for the first time in my life because I've never been to an NFL game, surprisingly. First one, so I love football. And now I had my dad, so we went up to Nashville yesterday, sat in the freezing cold, stopped for some sleet and rain, made it home before it started snowing in Nashville, and had a fun time. We watched the Titans absolutely dominate the Dolphins. Wasn't even close. Tua Tagovailoa did not look comfortable. I think the weather got to him, and his accuracy was just way off. And it was fumbling. He fumbled the ball like 3 different times yesterday. Just a horrible performance for him. And for the Dolphins, that knocked them out of the playoffs because of the Chargers' win yesterday. So that unfortunately they went from being in the playoff picture to being knocked out of it in one day. Just a brutal way for the Dolphins season to end because they were 1-7, had won 7 straight games, but you know, and all for nothing. Unfortunately, at the end of the day for Miami, I still think Brian Flores is a great coach. But they have to figure out what they want to do at quarterback because I don't know if Tua Tagovailoa is the guy. Of course, on the Titans side, just to put themselves in the position they are in, because right now, because of the Cincinnati Bengals defeating the Kansas City Chiefs yesterday, if the Titans went on Sunday against Houston, the Tennessee Titans at 12-5 would have the number 1 seed in the AFC, which is just insane. Of course, they lost to the Texans a couple of weeks ago, but I believe that they will not do it again. I think the Titans will take care of business, and I'll be very happy to not watch the Titans next week. I do not want to watch the Tennessee Titans play football on Wild Card Weekend. I want to rest until the divisional round because I think in this AFC, of how crazy it is, it would be huge to get that number 1 seed.
And the question is Derrick Henry gonna play in the postseason? Do you think he'll be available?
He'll play in the postseason. The question is, will he play this week? I think I would have him dress, and I would see how the game would go because I would hope that maybe the Titans will be able to take care of business without him. But if it's a close game in the second half, maybe you bring him out and let him do what you need to do to get that bye week because you want to give him that extra week if possible. Because if he's fully rested for the divisional round, then watch out. The Tennessee Titans are coming for the AFC because you have to come through the Music City. But in terms of do I think the Titans are going to make the Super Bowl, though, I don't know. It just depends on matchups. Right now, the hottest team in the AFC is the Cincinnati Bengals. Joe Burrow has had like 1,000 yards in the last 2 weeks. He is on fire. He's on his LSU mode right now. Really proving why he was the number 1 pick back in 2020. Obviously, unfortunately for the Colts, they lost their shot at the AFC South because Titans win. But even if the Titans had lost, the Vols are not the Colts. They lost to the Raiders, so they're now in a win and you're in scenario against the Jaguars, who they should be because the Jaguars are just a mess. But before we get into the playoff picture, though, we got to talk about Antonio Brown because that was a really weird situation. Because I didn't see it live because I was watching a football game live. But basically, it just sounds like to me that Antonio Brown just had a meltdown for no real reason. We don't know exactly why. He did what he does. We don't know
I,
why anyone does
I
anything.
from my research, that I did, according I think to Ian Rappaport and other NFL reports, Antonio Brown has been complaining about an injury, a nagging injury that kept him off practice Thursday and Friday. But Bruce Arians still took him to the game, and I think he wanted to force him to play, and he didn't want to play. So then he had a meltdown and left. And then Bruce Arians clearly says he's not a Buck anymore. So I think it was expected. I think the way that happened, I think even Tom Brady knew when he brought Antonio Brown that Antonio Brown is the kind of player who has expiration date. You know, he will play, he will be an amazing receiver, but he'll be a diva. And that I think right now, really, what NFL team could he possibly go right now?
I mean, no one's gonna pick him up. I mean, he's done because like I've never seen a player have a meltdown like that. The last time I saw something like that was I think it was Mekhi Brown. He was an Alabama football player. And he basically got into a fight with the whole Alabama sideline during the Alabama Georgia national title game back in 2018. But I've never seen a player throw their stuff into the crowd like that and then start dancing around as they left. And then they had the audacity to go and try to ask for a police escort to the airport. Which is
As
crazy.
as the Tampa Bay Buccaneers were in, were in the offensive team was, on pads. The game was happening. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers was in action, like the team.
Yeah, and they were down by 2 touchdowns as well to the Jets. And of course, they came back and won. And you got to credit Tom Brady for that. But it really is a shame. And he's really got to get some help. I mean, he's clearly not all there. And you do have to worry that he has CTE because I think he's taken a lot of hard hits in his career. And we've seen what happened with guys like Junior Seau and like Vincent Jackson. These stories often don't end well. So I hope he gets his help that he needs because he's going to need some in order to have a productive rest of his life. Because I think his football career is probably done. I want everyone to have a good life, and that's what is important right now. Can he have a good life? So it is going to be very. I'm going to be watching very carefully to see how he develops, how that story develops moving forward. But kind of wrap up the American topics with the NFL playoff picture. Um, Basically, there's 2 divisions left that had not been decided. The NFC West is how they're going to go to the Rams or the Cardinals. The Rams have the upper hand. If the Rams, let me see, I believe they play the Seahawks this week, and then the Cardinals play the Niners. Let's see. Hold on. I pull it up. Okay, so so the Niners play the Rams host the Niners, and then the Cardinals play the Seahawks. So if the Rams beat the Niners, they win the NFC West. If the Rams lose and the Cardinals win the NFC West. And then over in the AFC, I think off the top of my head, it is the East, the AFC East. If the Bills beat the Jets, the Bills win the AFC East. If the Bills lose and then the Patriots beat the Dolphins, the Patriots win the AFC East. Every other division has been decided. The NFC East goes to the Cowboys, NFC South Bucks, NFC North is the Packers, and the AFC South is the Titans, AFC North is the Bengals. What a story that is. And then the AFC West is the Chiefs. And then for the 1 seeds, the Packers clinched the 1 seed, so they're going to have the bye. I doubt we'll see Aaron Rodgers this week, probably the Jordan Love show. Give him some development. We won't see Aaron Rodgers until the division round. And then, of course, as I've said previously, if the Titans win, if they beat the Houston Texans, they will win the number 1 seed and get to take next week off if they. Now the Chiefs play on Saturday, so if the Chiefs were to lose, then that really makes it nearly impossible for the Titans to not get the 1 seed. But because I do believe that the Bengals have a chance too at the 1 seed. I'm correct. Yeah.
Yeah, because they're
Yeah, so the Bengals and Bills, I think, and the Patriots technically all still have a shot at the 1 seed. For like conference ties and stuff like that. But really, it's coming down to the Chiefs and the Titans. I think one of those two teams will get it. And I said, I think the Titans will take care of business and we'll get that 1 seed.
And interesting how Matt LaFleur had back to back to back seasons, with 13 wins.
Oh,
What a
absolutely. Yeah.
duo. What a duo by Matt LaFleur and Aaron Rodgers. Despite all the dramas in the off seasons, he still managed to, be the 1 seed again and win 13 games in the regular
Now, can
season.
they get it done in the NFC title game? Can they get it done? Can they
Yeah,
finally get
that's
it?
a big question.
Yeah. So, well, that's the big question. And then as well, in terms of the teams that, um, and in terms of the teams that need to win to get in, um, starting in the NFC,
I think
really
the only
the only real question is the last spot going to go to the Saints or is it going to go to the 49ers? If the 49ers lose, then the Saints have the chance to win and then get in. The Saints play I think it's the Falcons, and of course the Niners play at the Rams. So both teams between the Niners and the Rams have a lot riding on that game. And then because of conference records, the 49ers could conceivably get knocked out by the Saints. Of course, the Eagles are in as a wild card, so you don't have to worry about the Eagles. The Vikings got knocked out. In the AFC, the Colts play the Jaguars. I think they're going to win that game. If for some reason the Colts lose to Jacksonville, then in theory, both the Raiders and the Chargers could get in. But if the Colts win, then the Raiders-Chargers on Sunday night is going to be for a win and get in scenario. Whoever loses is out. Whoever wins
it's
is
going
in.
to be a Monday night. It's going to be a Monday night game.
Right.
Oh no, Sunday night. Is it here because my will be a Sunday night for Monday night already for European time, but that's true. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and then if the Colts were to lose, then that would open up a chance for the Ravens and the Steelers. But as I said, I think Ravens and Steelers, unfortunately, are going to be done just because I don't think the Colts are losing to Jacksonville. So that's where it is. What are you most excited for here in the last week of the NFL?
I mean, I'm excited definitely to see the last playoff match. I mean, definitely Rams and 49ers. That's going to be a hell of a game because both have playoff implications. The Rams need to win to solidify their number 2 seed and win the division. The 49ers need to win to get into the wild card. So that only I believe that game and Raiders and Chargers are the 2 games that both teams are fighting for something.
Yeah, and both Los Angeles as well. So LA is going to have a pretty interesting day, I think, on Sunday in terms of the playoffs. Obviously, I'm going to be watching the Titans. It's been since 2008 since the Titans last got the number 1 seed and got that first round bye. So huge deal for the Titans. I hope they take care of business. We'll see just how disciplined this team actually is. Because it's not on their impossible. They lost the Jets and the Texans earlier on. So just please, Titans, take care of business. All right. I think it's time for some hot takes. I guess I'll start. I'll go with the American hot take. I'm going to talk about the Baylor Bears. I really like their college basketball team this year. I think they're going to go back to back. They have a great defense again, even though they lost Davion Mitchell, some of their other talent. They just replaced them there. And I think that team, Scott Drew has his program down. And Baylor they can't miss right now. Of course, Baylor, the football team, won the Big 12 and the Sugar Bowl this year. Women's basketball team is top 10. There's no athletic department in America that's as hot right now as the Baylor Bears. And I would not be shocked if in March Madness they go back to back. How about your Brazilian hot take?
And I add to that, Tennessee Athletics is doing a great job. I think they was the only athletic program who had a team in a bowl game, College World Series, the NCAA men's and women's basketball.
Yeah, Tennessee Athletics is doing very well themselves. just kind of take the next step to actually start winning some championships.
My Brazilian hot take, definitely, I addressed that earlier. How obsessed is Brazilian soccer with coaches from Portugal? I know the last two successful coaches in Brazil were from Portugal. Abel Ferreira coaching Palmeiras and Jorge Jesus coaching Flamengo. Last three Libertadores titles were conquered by Portuguese coaches. But I believe you're going to just inflate the market for coaches. Of course, it devalues the Brazilian coaches, and I think it will create some sort of a dependency because other Portuguese coaches did not work. Ricardo Sapinto on Vasco da Gama and Jesualdo Ferreira in Santos did not work. They were very unsuccessful. So not all coaches from Portugal are going to be Jorge Jesus and Abel Ferreira. Paulo Souza is going to be the fifth coach from Portugal coming in to Brazil. So let's see if he's going to do Abel Ferreira or Jorge Jesus success, or it's going to fail as Gesualdo and Ricardo Sapinto. That's the big question. But I think but I believe it's not going to be as obsessed as it is right now. But definitely, I think Brazilian soccer cannot be only hiring Portuguese coaches as a solution to develop the or to like the answer to getting titles. I mean, of course, two cases of success makes you try try to replicate that, but not always works. But and also, I don't think that's healthy for the sport itself. And shout out to my friend Jose Alberto Fuminho, big broadcaster in Novo Odessa. Shout out, thank you so much for watching, and that's my hot take.
Yeah, I feel like American soccer has a similar issue with English coaches. Like we don't trust our coaches enough, so we need to always go out and get the European coaches. At some point, you gotta trust your own development because, um, let's see. Oh, okay. I actually got some breaking news here. So Mike Vrabel is saying that Derrick Henry is doing some work today at practice, and they have discussed opening the window for him to return. And decision will likely come midweek on whether or not he'll be available for the Texans game Sunday. So huge news for the Titans about Derrick Henry. But yeah, I don't know when we'll be back with the next episode, but because obviously the guest is enjoying his travels in Germany. Eventually, he'll be back in Brazil, and we'll get back to a normal schedule with two countries to America's all sports here in the year of 2022. But for Gus Tomazeli in Dusseldorf, Germany, don't know the state. Sorry, I don't know my German geography. And for myself in Chattanooga, Tennessee of the United States, this is Two Countries, Two Americas, All Sports. Thank you for listening to episode 10. We'll see you for episode 11. Take care, everyone, and have a great start to your 2022.